go now to Francesco Rizzuto, professor of European law and the dean of the School of Law at Liverpool Hope University. So, Francesco, once again, when discussions are held over what to do about this situation, we go back to sanctions. Belarus is already heavily sanctioned, so it hasn't worked yet. What do you think of this plan to sanction them even further?
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Yes, the plan to sanction Belarus further will simply exacerbate the problem. Look, there is no doubt that Belarus, with some support from Moscow, without a doubt, is using migrants to put pressure on the European Union. It
Sure.
just so happens that they've picked the state that has been the most xenophobic and lacking in solidarity with the rest of the European Union over how to deal with migrants. So it is difficult to see a way out of here without going via Moscow, which of course is what Mrs. Merkel did earlier on today, I believe.
Yeah, we've been hearing the Polish prime minister flat out calling Vladimir Putin the mastermind of this situation. Is that a fair assessment?
Look, I don't think there's much doubt that Belarus on its own, without either explicit or implicit support from Moscow, would be doing this. And if it was provoking the EU without the acquiescence of Moscow, it would be very, very foolish. So I think the problem is far deeper, far broader, far more serious than just Belarus against Poland or Belarus against the European Union. There's no doubt. And of course, showing images to the world of people in freezing conditions is a way of almost making the European Union seem the bad guy in all of this. So it really is an extremely difficult situation. And the idea, of course, that the European Union should now pay Belarus to help house these poor migrants who have been brought in to Belarus in order to basically go to the West seems a little bit cynical, to say the least.
Yeah, and we've heard the Belarusian president say he doesn't want any kind of armed conflict over this, but he's not going to kneel, as he put it, to the EU on this issue. So we see all sides dug in, as well as bad behavior on all sides. So if you could envision where a break is coming in this, what would that be?
I think it's difficult to see a break coming in without some kind of agreement with Mr. Putin in Moscow. How they're going to get out of this, because remember, we now have a face-off between the awkward squad in the European Union, a state that also perhaps has a problem with the rule of law and has been the most intransigent vis-a-vis migrants, i.e. Poland, less so the Baltic states, but they've been brought into the picture, facing off against Belarus, where there have been very, very serious issues. So if you want to destabilize and cause trouble in the European Union, this is an absolutely perfect way of doing it. So will the European Union back off? And I don't know. I don't think they will. And in any event, you're dealing with what I would regard as a bit of a renegade rogue state, i.e. Poland, who may not actually follow the line that the rest of the European Union wanted to follow, which is, of course, de-escalate tensions and try and deal with this through negotiation.
Exactly.
Even though, if I may add, even though, of course, it is extremely difficult to negotiate with a state and a government, i.e. Belarus, that the European Union does not recognize. So it's got to go via Moscow.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate, you might even say horrifying, that Poland and Lithuania have been put in this position. However, we also hear such disturbing reports coming out of Poland that troops have been there beating severely some of these migrants, that they're essentially being left in that forest to freeze or starve to death. Isn't there surely more that Poland could be doing just to treat these people as the human beings that they are?
Look, I think we need to be clear that because we're in an emergency situation along that border, it is extremely difficult to get verifiable information as to how these people are getting treated. There is no doubt, though, that the Polish authorities, and I talk about the Polish authority, the army, and the border police, have not behaved in a way that you would expect. However, these poor migrants have been thrown at them, almost physically thrown at them. So that creates a problem. But I do know from sources in Poland that there are many people along the border who don't take quite the sort of hardline approach that the Polish government has taken vis-a-vis these poor people. So I'd be a little bit skeptical about the idea of beatings and so on. I think that we mustn't fall into the trap of sort of hyping up violence and conflict and military conflict, and either one side shooting in the air to force these migrants across the border, and then when they cross the border, the other side beating them up. I mean, this is a sort of perfect hell scenario.
It
Now,
is.
I'm sure things are not great, but I think we need to be careful about not falling into the trap of, the first casualty in war, though this is a war by other means, is the truth here. We've got to be very, very careful.
Yeah,
But there's no
excellent
doubt the
points.
images,
Oh, go ahead,
the
Francesco.
images do. I was going to say the images speak for themselves. It's pretty desperate. But remember, images are also an instrument of conflict.
Sure.
And here we do have a conflict. We have a conflict between the European Union and Poland in the front line and Belarus, who we don't recognize. I'm now talking as a citizen of the European Union. So there's the problem. There's got to be a way around this. And I think Merkel is probably in her last weeks as Chancellor of Germany is the key. Because remember, many of these migrants want to go to Germany. They don't want to stay in Poland.
Sure.
Notwithstanding the xenophobia that the Polish government clearly appears to demonstrate or display.
Yeah, and it's being called hybrid warfare and state terrorism. Francesco, you raise such good points. Always appreciate your insight. Thank you.